Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulullah. Again, my brothers and sisters, thank you for joining me when we speak about the golden morals of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And today we have one of these particular stories that, really kind of touches the heart of the believers, and it's an example of how a particular person can do very little and just believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just a simple belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that can guarantee him or her paradise. So the story today is about the happy slave. Now, we talk about the Battle of Khaybar, and this took place in the 7th year after the Hijrah. Around 150 kilometers north of Medina, we find this oasis by the name of Khaybar, and there were plenty of fortresses in that region, in that area. And that area, this particular area, or Jewish tribe that lived in this particular area, is populated by Jewish tribes, was known by the name of Naima. And this fortress was put to siege by the Muslims. The Muslims, had their ultimatum, I believe, or war, pretty much. So the fortress was put to siege, and there was a slave in that fortress, an Abyssinian slave, and this is the story that we're talking about. It's about him, this slave. And his name was Aslam. Now, Aslam's slave master, his name was Amr. And Aslam's duty was to tend to Amr's sheep, so he was a shepherd. So when he saw that the people of Khaybar were preparing for war, he asked his slave master, who are they fighting? What are they preparing for? And he said, we're preparing to fight this man who claims to be a prophet. Because we know the Jews, they were expecting the Prophet to come from within them, but when they found out that he came from, from the Arabs, from the people of Quraysh, they were, not satisfied. And once he heard that this man claimed to be a prophet, he was curious, and he wanted to meet this man who was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in person, and he wanted to know. And he was on this self quest or a mission to find out the truth. So Amr. When he left the fortress and he was tending to the sheep, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam finally made it to Khaybar, and he set up camp with his army. And this Abyssinian slave, he turned up to this camp with his sheep, and he requested the permission to meet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now we look at the eloquence and the manner of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the conversation that he had with this slave. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam accepted, or the companions, they brought this man to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to have a conversation with him, and he asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what do you preach? And what is it that you're calling to, Ya Rasulullah? What's your mission? What's your purpose? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said in a hadith that I am calling to Islam, and that you declare that there is no God worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I am his messenger and slave. So this man said, if I were to believe, and this is just one of the narrations, if I were to believe in Allah and testify to this, what would I gain? And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he replied, you will gain paradise, so long as you die upon Islam. So Aslam then asked him, he told him that I'm ugly, my body smells, I have neither money or wealth. And if I die serving these people who are the Jews, in his job, would I still enter paradise? And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, yeah, you shall have paradise as long as you die as a Muslim. And this man immediately submitted to Islam. Aslam, actually Aslam. And in another narration, it maintains that Aslam actually became a Muslim, but he asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what happens if I died in this faith? And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you would go on to paradise, but just different questioning with the different narrations. So he tells him, so this is the other part of the story. So this man Aslam, he says to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I have these sheep, there's plenty of sheep. What do I do with these sheep now that I'm a Muslim, now that I'm with you guys? And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the response he had, and in the time of war, you would take every single advantage you have away from the enemy. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he wanted to maintain his dignity, and he wanted to maintain his excellence and his elegance. So he told Aslam to slap the sheep, or to blow onto the sheep, or to grab dust and throw it into their faces, and they will make their own way back to their owners. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide them back to their owners. Instead of taking the sheep and feeding the army for days and days and days. So this is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam instructed him to do. And he did this, and he said to the sheep, go back to your owners, and they made their way into the fortress all the way on their own. When these sheep returned, Amr, who was the Jewish man, he knew that Aslam, submitted to Islam. And in the meantime, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had been advocating people to fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, particularly within the army. So Ali ibn Abi Talib, he had set out bearing the banner of war to this fortress, and Aslam, he followed him into the fight. And he was there and he was fighting against the Jews who had him as their slave. Now, during the battle, Aslam, he martyred. He was martyred, he was killed, and the casket was brought back to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this next part is where we find, the good feeling that, that makes us happy to be Muslim. And we ponder on the greatness of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, particularly what he said when he saw this corpse, and he said to his companions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had honored this slave and brought him to Khaybar, and I saw two maidens of paradise by him, even though he has never made one sajda to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He never prostrated once to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if someone were to ask, who among the companions did not perform a single prostration or a single rak'ah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and yet earned paradise, we would say Aslam was one of them. And he would describe himself as to have he was ugly, a smelly body, and had no money or wealth. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, in contrast to Aslam's words, Allah has beautified your face, perfumed your body, and increased your wealth. Verily, I saw his two wives among the hur. Jazakumullah khairan, brothers and sisters. Thank you again for listening. We will continue with the morals of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam during our video next week.